Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 14th episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week I am joined by a Tar Heel, a volunteer, and a Phoenix, all wrapped up into one. My guest co-host this week is Ashley Bogle. Hello, Ashley. How are you doing?
Hey, Liam. I am great. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm pretty good. So much better now that you're here. Ashley and I met when we were both journalism students at Elon University in Elon, North Carolina. Go Phoenix. She has a background in local news too, and now she is a strategic communications manager at Fletcher Marketing in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, I am. It's been an interesting career switch, but I have loved every second of it. So yeah, it's really, really great to be able to do this here with you, Liam.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. And I'm so glad you decided to do it. But I also know that you're I think what you did 5 years in local news. Am I right about that? Remember that correctly?
Yes.
So I know that you know all about I'm sure you've done a shooting or two. And also I believe you were even on not that this has nothing to do with this episode, but you did some reporting on the Summer Wells case in Knoxville, correct?
Summer Wells and the Joel Guy Jr. trial were two really interesting cases that I've followed. So those are some good future ones for you in the future.
I will. Oh, I know all about those. They're on my list, Ashley. You know they are. Yeah. So what do you say we get to our wine of the week?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Okay, this is my favorite part of the episode. Also mostly because I love the popping sound. And it's so funny because I think the wine companies that have the twist off wines, I feel like are really losing out on profit because I would definitely pay like $10 extra just to hear that wine pop sound.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, yeah. I didn't know what you were going to choose for this episode. And I was like, oh, I hope it's a twist off just because they're so much easier.
Two different types of people in the world.
You saw my fiance open the wine before this episode.
Yeah, I did.
I was like, I'm just not strong enough. I'm just weak. I leave local news. I leave carrying my own gear, and I become weak.
What you need is one of those like automatic ones. One of the automatic, like the electric wine openers. I think that is really going to open your horizons in a big way.
Yes, I'll add it to the wedding registry.
Okay, oh yeah. So little casual note there. Ashley is engaged, getting married next summer. So congratulations to you. Are you so excited?
Absolutely. It's been a process planning a wedding, having a career change, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and we also don't have to like mention this because like triggering, but I know that you guys like went through like, a pretty big like obstacle. So I feel like if you went, that sounds really morbid because it sounds like I'm like saying that you guys are having like problems already, but like I guess I should give more context, like the house issues that you guys just have. So
yeah, with our home flooding on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas to us.
Yeah. Hey, if you can get through that, then you can get through anything.
Exactly.
So cheers to a very long marriage.
Cheers.
To the three of
Yes.
You. Cheers to you.
Clink. If only we could clink.
If only my second favorite wine related noise.
Oh, yes. Sure.
Love that. This week we're drinking Bogle Vineyards Chardonnay from California. It has hints of green apple and pear with honeycomb and vanilla undertones. Which honeycomb, I never, that didn't register for me when I wrote that.
No.
Honeycomb is really an interesting flavor to add in a wine, but now that I'm thinking about it, I definitely get some honeycomb in there.
Yeah. It's so smooth and buttery that I don't even feel like I've gotten the green apple and the pear.
I definitely can see with the green apple. I mean, I guess like when you're talking about green apple in terms of like the sourness of it, which feels like a weird way to describe wine, but
yes,
it is. I definitely it's almost like not like a green apple from like an actual apple, but like a green apple from like a candy.
Yes, I taste that too more. Now that you said that there's a sour hint, I taste that too.
Yeah, I think I'm giving this like 4 out of 5 glasses. I'm really enjoying this.
I think I need more time to decide.
Okay, we can revisit. We can definitely revisit at the end. Well, so on that note, let's transition into our story of the week. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready to hear it.
Okay, let's do it. So have you ever heard of Teresita Basa before I asked you to do this episode?
No, not at all.
Okay, so this is going to be a wild ride for you then, Ashley. This week, I want to tell you a story that crosses the line from the abnormal to the paranormal. It's a crime that went cold until an unconventional tip pushed investigators in the right direction to make an arrest. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Teresita Basa, the ghost witness. Teresita Basa was born in the Philippines in 1929. She was really interested in music and graduated from the University of Assumption in Manila in early 1960. She moved to the U.S. shortly after that for a better life and to continue studying. She enrolled at Loyola University in Chicago to study medicine, though. By the 1970s, she started working at Edgewater Hospital as a respiratory therapist. Friends and family described her as quiet and unassuming, but also someone who really excelled at what she did. She really enjoyed her job and received praise from her patients. So really that kind of person who, if she's going to do it, she's going to do it right. On the side, though, she was still practicing her passion for music. She would give piano lessons for kids in the neighborhood. On February 21st, 1977, Teresita worked a shift at the hospital as normal and returned to her apartment on North Pine Grove Avenue in Chicago around 5:30, where she lived on her own. Around 7:30, she got on the phone with a friend named Ruth Loeb. Ruth says that Teresita told her that she had a male friend coming over, but didn't say who it was. And Ashley, I'm not sure how much I should be reading into this point because in hindsight, it does seem like a little bit odd, but at the same time, I could see a friend telling me that, a friend's coming over and, me just not really asking a whole lot of questions about that.
Yeah, I think it depends on how well you know the person. Like if this is someone that you don't know super well, then maybe you just say like, yeah, I have somebody coming over in just a little bit, or she has a guest coming or something. But I don't know if that would be something that would alarm me, but I would feel guilty if something were to happen to that person and I didn't ask questions in advance.
Yeah, and I could also see maybe I don't know, if when investigators go ask her about this afterwards, maybe just being like, yeah, we talked about her days, we talked about what we're gonna watch on TV that night. Like she said she had a friend coming over, and also she said that she was gonna, you know what I mean? Just kind of naming things going down, and maybe it didn't really stick out at all, but it was just one of the things that she remembered that she said.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So Ruth and Teresita hang up after a 30-minute girl powwow, and they both go about the rest of their respective nights. But around 10 that night, Teresita's neighbors call 911 when they smell smoke coming out of Teresita's apartment. Firefighters get to Teresita's 15th floor apartment and bust down the door. They quickly find the source of the fire that's filling the room and the hallway with smoke. It's the mattress in the bedroom, and it's actively on fire. They quickly put it out, though, but as they look around, they realize that something's just a little off in the apartment. It's pretty disheveled, and there are clear signs of a struggle, but nobody's home. That's when they decide to lift the charred mattress to get a look at what's underneath it. And that's when they realize that they're not at the site of a fire, but they're at the site of a crime scene. When firefighters lift the mattress, they find a woman's naked body underneath it with clothes just tossed on top of her. When they moved the clothes, they found a butcher's knife buried deep into her chest.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's quite a scene if you're a firefighter just thinking that you're just coming across, just your average everyday kind of fire deal. And then all of a sudden, oh.
Yeah. And I feel like that's really gruesome too. What's the motive?
We're just about to get to that. Actually, hold on now. That would be a really short episode if I told you about that. So firefighters call in investigators who are able to determine that the woman underneath the mattress was indeed 48-year-old Teresita Basa. Investigators said it was pretty obvious the fire was set intentionally to cover up the murder. They also said it appeared as though Teresita was sexually assaulted since she was naked underneath the mattress. But to be clear, later police said that they found no physical evidence of rape. They look around the apartment for clues. Nothing officers find point directly to a potential motive, and they aren't able to determine if anything was stolen from the apartment despite the mess. They also weren't able to find much physical evidence that wasn't destroyed in the fire, meaning they weren't able to find anything that pointed to a suspect who may have set that fire. But they were able to find a note that investigators believe Teresita wrote herself. The note said, "Get theater tickets for AS."
That's so bizarre. There's just a lot of open ends here right now that I think investigators would feel kind of all over the place. A mattress on top of a woman with a knife in her chest, theater tickets.
Right.
It seems really disjointed at this point in the investigation.
Yeah, and because usually they find something, and so I think that you kind of like you said, like a lot of open-ended situations where it's like, oh, like mattress, like that's weird, like, oh, clothes, that's weird, like note, that's weird, but like nothing that like pointed anything into any particular direction, I suppose. So, I mean, I can imagine, investigators just being like, what the heck happened here?
Yeah.
So right away, police assume that this mysterious AS is somehow involved in Teresita's murder. But of course, they aren't able to immediately point to any specific person. I mean, that's not much to go off of, like, at all. So they start interviewing friends and family, neighbors and coworkers, trying to get an idea of Teresita's lifestyle and to see if maybe they had an idea of who this AS may be. But they all say the same thing. Nope, no one comes to mind. Teresita had no known enemies, and police dig up no significant leads on this. Police even reach out to the public for help. They ask anyone with information on Teresita or her death to come forward, but they come up with nothing, or at least nothing significant. And Ashley, I feel like that's a little strange, only because, like, you can probably relate to this, because every time I've ever done a story on anything that's like, oh, like, police are asking for any kind of information, like, you can call this number. Like, I feel like I always get something. Like, I even get an email or a phone call from somebody saying, like, yep, this is, what I know about the situation, even if it's like totally bogus. Especially like in Chicago, it feels weird that like nobody called.
Do we know if she had a lot of friends or family in the area or anything like that?
So no, so her family still lives in the Philippines. That's a really good point to bring up. So thanks for doing that. And she really, like I said at the top, like she was really quiet. I'm assuming she didn't really make like a whole lot of friends. She had some. She had Ruth. She had, people like friends from work. She had neighbors who she seemed to know pretty well enough to, teach their kids piano.
Yeah, and I almost feel like so oftentimes that when we hear about these types of cases, it's often someone close to them. So if she's so quiet and just kind of unassuming, it had to be somebody that she knows. Like my first thought is always kind of a significant other or like a family member, something like that, because you just see that all the time with various cases.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting you brought that up because I didn't put this in the episode because I saw this, like I saw fleeting references to this, but nothing really. Like I saw a couple references to some boyfriend that she may have had, that she may have been fighting with, that police may have looked into, but I never saw that like in any like reliable source. So I didn't bring that up. So I guess just like take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. So officers spend the next 5 months completely baffled about Teresita's murder. They have no leads, no suspects, and nothing that even slightly resembled a motive. Until one day when an investigator gets a call that sends chills up his spine. In August of that year, the lead investigator on Teresita's case returns to his desk to find a note asking him to call an officer in Evanston, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. When the investigator calls the officer, he says he got a call from a Dr. Jose Chua, who said he had some information about the murder of a woman named Teresita Basa. Well, the investigator calls the doctor, and when the man picks up, he seems a little embarrassed at what he's about to say to the officer. And Ashley, grab your glass, because Dr. Chua asked the investigator if he believed in occult or supernatural forces.
I mean, I believe in ghosts, but I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if I believe in supernatural forces.
Listen, I grew up with you don't talk about three things. You don't talk about religion, politics, or ghosts, because you just never know what the other person thinks about ghosts. And so I'm glad you said that, because I was really trying to figure out a way to break the ice with you.
Yeah, I believe in ghosts, but I think when I think of like supernatural, I think of like like people who feel possessed by like the demon or are suddenly transfixed on certain things, but like really interesting supernatural stuff, not just like ghosts are kind of, they can be fun in my head. They're fun.
They have to be. They have to be. Otherwise, like, what are they going to do to us?
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, I totally feel you. So Dr. Chua tells the investigator that his wife Remy had been having these dreams and visions about a woman named Teresita Basa. It started at Remy's job when she says she saw Teresita's face behind a man in their locker room. But then he said it got even more frequent and even more spooky. But before I get there, my mind just started like whizzing here, Ashley. So I had to do some research on visions and dreams of ghosts for us. So what do you say we go there first?
Let's go there. Let's see what this is all about.
So, according to a book written by Colin Wilson called Beyond the Occult, what Remy is experiencing is called the mind's survival of death. Basically, Wilson argues that your body can die, but your brain can store these memories of your death almost like evidence. Kind of like, I imagine, a traumatic experience maybe. Your mind may store specific details of an attack or something if it feels like it may be useful in the future, but it can also wipe those details from your memory if it would do more harm than good. Now, ghostly possessions are actually pretty accepted in most cultures in the Philippines, which, remember, is where Teresita is from. But Remy is Filipina too. So it differs based on the ethnic group, but generally it's understood in Filipino culture that everyone has anywhere from 2 to 5 souls. And when you die, one soul may be gone, but there's at least one more that sticks around and kind of does your bidding after death. The most common form of these stories of ghostly apparitions is the tale of the White Lady, or the woman in white. Now, this is a story that is spread throughout many different cultures in many different forms, but it generally carries with it a theme of murder, betrayal, and unrequited love. In the Philippines, visits by the White Lady usually include a taxi driver driving on Balate Drive when a beautiful woman asks him for a ride. The taxi driver usually strikes up some conversation, but then turns around to see the woman's face is bruised and bloody, causing him to stop and abandon his car.
This is all just so crazy that I think I need an entire bottle of wine to be able to keep listening.
Oh, go for it, girl. Nobody's judging you.
I haven't even finished this first glass, but I think it's really interesting how different cultures have different beliefs. I am not familiar with Filipino culture whatsoever. So that's just really interesting that these ladies that are from there, this is something that it sounds like is very much just a part of their upbringing. And now it's coming back to truly be a part of Teresita's life beyond the grave.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. And, because I've heard of this before about like, certain cultures and certain religions believing in afterlife, but I guess I've never like seen it in action, like, for lack of better words, like seen it be like played out in court.
Yeah.
Like that just seems very like, I feel like it's always just been like these like, mythical understandings that like, yes, this kind of exists. But like the fact that like it's happening, weird.
Very weird. Absolutely.
So it really only relates to Teresita, though, to show how the ghosts in Filipino culture usually have some unfinished business to attend to. And according to the Chuas, Teresita needs them to help her take care of hers. Ashley, we're about halfway through, and I'm really enjoying this glass of wine.
Definitely.
How's it going for you over there?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's grown on me. Like I said, doing dry January, I haven't had alcohol in a while, so I'm taking it slow. But I think going back to when we discussed that there's pear and apple flavors, I definitely can smell the pear, but I get the sour from the apple and the
flavor. Wait, and it's so cool too how like some wines, like you really need the smell to like really get the full experience.
Exactly.
On that note, I think that's probably a good time to like transition into the next point. Late one night, Remy lays down for a nap when suddenly Dr. Chua starts hearing a strange voice. It's coming from Remy, but the voice is definitely not hers. The voice says, "I am Teresita Basa, and the man who killed me is still at large.
How weird. Because now you're not just like hearing things, but like you're actually personifying that person coming through them. And that sounds like something that I feel I've only seen in the scariest of horror movies.
Oh my God, I can't imagine what he was thinking when he all of a sudden he was like, who's that? You know, that's so crazy. Yeah. So, the voice is speaking in Teresita's native language of Tagalog, and it begins to tell Dr. Chua the story of Teresita's death. Teresita's voice, still coming from Remy's mouth, tells Dr. Chua that a man named Alan Showery, A.S., was helping Teresita repair her television when he attacked her, killed her, and set fire to her mattress.
Okay, so that explains the tickets? Maybe the theater tickets and those initials?
Well, and it certainly at least seems to like align with what we kind of already know. And you'll kind of see this like throughout the story is like a lot of these pieces are like, okay, that's weird, but that can't be true. But it's like, oh, actually, it is true.
Oh, okay. I need you to keep going because this is just too interesting.
Yeah. So it's about to get even more interesting too. So Teresita actually knows Alan. He's an orderly at Teresita's hospital, basically responsible for janitorial services and maintenance. But Remy knows this man too, actually. Remy actually works in the same hospital as Teresita and knew of her too. This was really more of like a working relationship though. They weren't really like getting drinks outside of work by any means, but they were familiar with each other because they like all work together. When Remy comes to, she says she has no memory of these visits from Teresita, and Jose decides that this is like too strange and it's probably just better to brush it off and not go to the police about it. But a few days later, it happens again. Remy is laying down on their bed when Teresita's voice comes back through Remy. Teresita asks Jose why he never went to police, to which he replies he just needs more evidence that what she's saying is true before he bursts into a police station looking like a crazy person saying that a dead woman is possessing his wife. So Teresita says that Alan ended up taking some of Teresita's jewelry and gave it to his girlfriend. She also says that there are names and numbers of friends and family who could identify the jewelry. So he calls them and asks what kind of jewelry Teresita owned, and some of the jewelry did end up matching what Teresita told Jose about. So this seemed to be enough to convince Jose to go to the police department.
This is all really interesting because it happened twice. And the second time seems as if he had like a full-fledged conversation with Teresita Remy. And it has you really questioning afterlife and powers above throughout this entire story.
Yeah. And you know, I do, like, let's just like pause and take a second to think about like how like it, and again, like this is like, I've like everything I've read on this is like secondary and like, you know, tertiary sources on this. So maybe like take like a grain of salt also, but you know, I think I'm trying to think out like how to even say this, like the fact, like he just seems like this is like so normal, you know, like this is just like he doesn't really question it, I guess, like just at least again just based on how the story's been told over and over and over again. It's just like, yes, like this voice came through and they just started like talking, and then like at some point he was like, okay, let's just like go to the police about it.
Absolutely. And did we establish, is he from the Philippines as well?
So I never saw that like confirmed, but I think so. Like I feel like it has to be because she was speaking Tagalog, so like it had like he had to have understood it too.
Okay.
So I think I feel pretty confident saying like yes, he must be from the Philippines too, but I never saw that confirmed.
Okay. Because I think it makes a little bit more sense if, again, we go back to the Filipino culture, where this seems to be more prominent, that maybe it's not as jarring to him because of his cultural background.
Yeah. Well, but also, too, I think there may be like a little bit of a difference between common as an understanding, but not common as like a practice. Like, how often is this happening in the Philippines? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The way that it sounds as if like daily people are having these types of dreams in the Philippines, which I'm sure if that's the case, we need to book a flight over there.
Yeah, right. Like that. Right. Like I just can't imagine like that can be true. But I don't know. I mean, I guess too, like, I guess if you grew up in that kind of culture where, like, yes, these things can happen, and like you grow up like being taught this, and like this is, maybe it doesn't feel as abnormal. Whereas, like, to me, like, I've never even thought about that happening. So it's like, if that happened to me, I'd be like, oh my God, like, I would be freaking out. Like, I wouldn't even know what to do. I'd probably have a heart attack.
Yeah. And then to have the thought, I feel like the police would be the last place I'd want to take my thoughts to, because I feel like, especially in the US, they would think, you're crazy.
Oh, for sure.
You need help.
Yeah.
This is not
mental hospital.
Right.
Yeah. No, mental hospital for sure. Yeah. So detectives weren't really sure what to make of this information. They weren't sure if they could trust it. But at this point, they had nothing else to go off of. So they decide to at least check this tip out. Detectives go back to some of Teresita's friends and coworkers to ask again about what they knew about that night and to see if they knew of this Alan Shorey. One of her coworkers say, oh, yeah, actually, I do know him. And right before Teresita was killed, I actually overheard that Alan was supposed to go over to her apartment to repair her television. Exactly like what Teresita's supposed ghost said to Dr. Chua.
This has to be connected at this point. In my head, it only makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I was saying about like these little things about like, oh, that's so crazy. But then it's like, oh, like, nope, like check mark, like that's true. Like it's like that keeps happening. And it's like, okay, like I could see, I guess, how all of a sudden, like all these like pieces, like it went from some like crazy tip to, oh no, this is actually exactly the tip that we needed to put these timeline together.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that seemed to be enough for police to at least go talk to this Alan guy. So they go over to his apartment and he goes willingly with police to the station to answer some questions. They ask him if he knows Teresita, and he originally says no, he doesn't. But then detectives say that his coworkers said that they overheard that he was going to fix her TV that night, which he again denies. But after a while and a little bit of questioning, he eventually admits that he was going to work on Teresita's television, but he says he didn't have the right tools to fix it. Plus, he says his apartment was having its own electrical problems that night, so he had to go back home to fix it, and then he left Teresita's apartment.
Yeah, but if you lie and then tell the truth, something's up. Something's up. I think especially with the tickets for AS, like the theater tickets, we can't forget about those.
Right.
And just the fact that if there's anybody I'm going to be honest with, it's going to be the police.
Yeah, right. So they don't really ask about the jewelry that Teresita says that Alan had taken from her apartment. But again, the Chuas claim that Alan gave the jewelry to his girlfriend, Yanka. So when detectives bring Alan back to his apartment, they just like stop and just casually ask some questions to Yanka, who is pregnant at the time. And when they talk to her, they notice something that is definitely setting off some alarm bells. Yanka is wearing the exact jewelry that Dr. Chua said Teresita described to him. It's a pearl ring and a jade pendant that Teresita's father bought for her mother as a gift from France.
Now this is just something that really paints the picture of Alan Shorey potentially being there that night. Whether he's the killer or not, I would think that he would at least have some sort of idea of who did it, whether it's him or somebody else. He could either be a witness or he could be the killer.
And it's another example of this bizarre story that police are being told by these people who, claim to be visited by this ghost to, okay, no, actually there are a lot of pieces of evidence that, regardless of the ghosts, like are pointing to, Alan having some sort of connection to Teresita when, again, like when they first asked him about it, he was like, no, never heard of her.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So they point out the jewelry and ask Yanka where she got them from. And she says that Alan gave them to her as a late Christmas gift. Investigators question Yanka about Alan and they say, hey, like, did you ever take care of those electrical problems that you guys had? To which she replies, what electrical problems? Yanka explains that their apartment never had any sort of electrical issue. And even if it did, she says Alan would have no idea how to fix it. And I'm no engineer, and I'm not sure what like electrical problems Alan seemed to want investigators to believe was happening in their apartment, but it seems that if you can't fix electrical problems in your home, you definitely like can't fix a television.
Totally agree. This is definitely setting off alarm bells, like you said, for investigators.
Yeah. Well, and also like very circumstantial evidence on its face anyways, you know, like God knows, like he could have bought that jewelry from some guy on the street. Like he could have, like a lie does not make a killer, but it certainly is not adding, looking good to him at this point. So that was enough for investigators to take another look at Alan, and they question him again, and he eventually confesses to killing Teresita Basa. He says he did agree to go work on Teresita's TV that night. Alan was having some financial hardships, and so Teresita had been hiring him to do some odd jobs to earn some extra cash. He says he did go to her apartment and then left because he didn't have the right tools, but then made the decision to return and rob her apartment. When he got back to Teresita's apartment, she let him in, and as soon as she turned around to lock the door, he said he attacked her, derobed her to make it look like a sexual assault. After he killed her, he said he only found $30, so he took some more of her expensive-looking jewelry to make the murder seem more worthwhile.
That's so sad that it seems like she was trying to honestly help him, and by hiring him to do just different jobs around the house, and he really took advantage of that. And he only found $30 and then took the jewelry, and he didn't even pawn the jewelry. He just gave it to his girlfriend.
Yeah, that's what I don't really, understand about that part either. Like you said, like you'd think that if he was really trying to make a buck, like, so he took $30 and, jewelry that he didn't even make any money off of. So why did you do it?
Yeah. And especially since, that's a gruesome murder. We just need to revisit the fact that, he stabbed her with a butcher's knife. Was it even premeditated? I don't even know, because if he just... A butcher's knife is what you have in your kitchen, so...
Right. I'm not a prosecutor, but that seems pretty premeditated to me to go to this apartment, leave, and then come back, and as soon as the door's closed and locked, that's when you make your move. I should also say too, because I didn't put this at the top of the episode for some reason, but investigators said that he lived very close to Teresita, and again, they knew pretty early on, I think, that he worked with her, and what kind of relationship they had and that kind of thing. So I guess I should say that when they go question him, they seem to have a lot more information than just a TV repair.
Yeah. It sounds like they have a co-worker working relationship. That I think a lot of us have all experienced in life.
Well, and also too, it seems a very casual, hey, Alan, that kind of thing. Nothing, again, they're not hanging out outside of work, probably very surface level, and then at some point, maybe he was complaining about, money stuff, and he was and she was hey, I need my TV repaired. You want to make a couple bucks? It
seemed very innocent on her end, and he really took advantage of that.
Yeah, he really did. And also, just another note, I almost wonder, because inside of your home, you have more than $30 in cash. I guess I'm just wondering where the rest of her money is, and I was almost wondering if that was the money that he was going to give to him, or that she was going to give to him.
Sure.
For fixing the TV.
It's interesting that he just took the jewelry and the cash. Unless she just didn't have a lot there and just there wasn't anything else expensive for him to take.
Well, Alan actually later retracts his entire confession, though, saying he was coerced into confessing by police, who threatened to arrest his pregnant girlfriend if he didn't admit to doing it himself. As Alan is waiting for trial, his lawyers ask a judge to dismiss all of his charges, arguing that police had little to go off of and only based his arrest on Remy's bizarre paranormal experiences.
So he confesses and then he retracts it.
Based on a coercion claim, which, again, to be clear, 70s, I've read so many different stories about police really putting the pressure on people to confess to something that they had nothing to do with, especially around that time. So, I don't necessarily put it past them, but I don't know. I mean, it just looks really bad for you. Like, I just can't really, I can't really imagine that argument went over very well to a judge. So
Yeah, I think that there's too much evidence at this point.
right. Investigators argue, though, that, like, yes, this was the basis of their investigation, this bizarre visit from Teresita to Remy and the Chuas, but they only used it as their initial tip when they were able to gather additional evidence subsequently. At his trial, prosecutors call a range of witnesses, including officers and Teresita's neighbors and coworkers, but interestingly enough, they never call Remy to the stand, which, like, I found really interestingly because it seems like they would have had, like, a great opportunity for, meaning Alan's attorney, to really begin poking some holes in prosecutor stories here about Remy's premonitions, but prosecutors argued that Remy had no memory of Teresita's visits to Remy, so, like, there was no point, I guess, in calling her to testify, and the judge agreed, I guess.
Do we know if they called Jose to the stand?
I don't think so either.
Oh.
Again, I never saw that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Remy might be a little bit harder, but Jose was the one who really witnessed that. If she was asleep and she has no memory of Teresita taking over her body, more or less, Jose would be my...
Right, but Jose definitely does.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you would think so, but again, I never saw that. I don't know, unless I'm just missing something really obvious here, because I had that exact same thought. I was like, Jose had to be there. But it's also, too, like, I mean, I'm about to get here in a second, like, about my little thoughts about Remy and Jose, but I, really, just from a defense, because as a prosecutor, your job, obviously, is to build this story, build this timeline, and a defense attorney's job is to poke holes in it. And it just seems like this would be the most obvious person to turn to poke holes in someone's story. So, like, why wouldn't she be subpoenaed? Like, I don't understand. Like, it just seems like she, like, I don't know. It just feels like they both have to have something to go off of in terms of, like, I don't know. This whole thing is just so weird, actually, and it just
supernatural. Hi, ma'am.
Yeah, right.
Here's how, like, the questioning would go. Do you remember a woman taking over your body on the night of XYZ?
Yeah, right.
No.
Right. Well, but you would think, because she knew this like Alan too, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you would think, like, at the very least, you'd want to investigate some kind of, like, motive to frame somebody, and, like, like, I don't know. It just seems like there should have been something there to see, like, to really see, at the very least, for a defense attorney to put her up there just to show how ridiculous this all is. You know what I mean? And, like, not to say that, not to, like, say that, like, the belief is ridiculous, but, like, to try to make it look ridiculous.
Yes, exactly. That in American culture, this isn't something that's super common. And for people to believe in the supernatural is definitely thought of as different. And this was a time back when that stuff wasn't even talked about, I feel like, in society, whereas today it's a little bit more common, but in the 70s it wasn't. So
accepted, yeah.
Exactly. For either the prosecution or the defense to not turn to them is a little bit interesting.
Odd. Well, and also, like, I could see a jury in Chicago, not buying that at all. So and, like, I would imagine an defense attorney would have a pretty easy time doing that. I don't know, but, like, and also too, like, just the fact that you based your not based it, but, like, the whole investigation was stemmed from this tip. You'd think that would be a major, like, linchpin in this thing.
Because I think without it, if I were a jury member, I don't know how I would feel like, what do I have to convict somebody on?
Right. Well, because also, like, from a police perspective, like, without this tip, like, Alan's never arrested.
No. Do we know how long he went before he was arrested?
It was, so it was 5 months after the murder when Jose calls investigators. Okay. So I would imagine, like, shortly after that.
Okay. So. Yeah. that's quite a lengthy time of freedom. So yeah, I think it's definitely that breakthrough in the case is so significant for none of the lawyers to utilize it is bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely. So the jury is not able to reach a verdict, and the case is declared a mistrial, but prosecutors are not letting it go. They are going to try their case against Alan again, but they never have to. A month later, on February 23rd, 1979, Alan pleads guilty to Teresita's murder, as well as robbery and arson charges. It's rumored he decided to accept a plea deal after Teresita's spirit visited him in jail. He is sentenced to 14 years in prison.
My first thought is, this man's back out. It's been more than 14 years since the 70s.
Yeah, well, and also, so, like, we're about to get there, too, but, like, he doesn't even serve that long. But I was shocked, too, when I only saw 14 years. I was like, to probably just the arson charges, and you're sentenced to less time than 14 years. You know, like, that's crazy to me. So I don't really get how he gets away with murder like that. But I don't know. I can also, like, and I see this all the time, too, where it's like, it's a high profile case that is going unsolved, that is really, you know, probably looking a little embarrassing to investigators, to the police department. So I can also, you know, just, again, going back to, like, you know, playing devil's advocate, maybe, like, going back to, like, his claims that he was coerced into confessing, like, I could see how maybe potentially, like, the officers were really just trying to get a conviction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, like, just to clear the case, just to close it. You know, I don't know. I don't like to think that's even, like a possibility. But, I mean, 14 years, like, a 14-year sentence for a plea deal, like, that's very low for murder. And so I could, like, I mean, that's kind of where my mind goes to that.
Yeah. And I also want to bring up, too, because we haven't talked about this, the fact that her family could all still be in the Philippines and, like, doesn't even know, you know, or maybe they do know, but, and they can't come over to the U.S., but, like, I wonder where they are in all of this, and if they had, maybe they had, like, victim statements. Yes. If maybe they had victim statements, that maybe that could have increased his sentence.
Yeah. Well, and that's usually, you know, just in case, for listeners who don't maybe understand how the process works, like, the sentencing hearing is usually when all those victim statements kind of come out, and that's usually a dependency on how long the judge sentences somebody to prison, regardless of a plea deal. Like, that's, like, you know, if the victim statement's strong enough, the plea deal's not even going to matter what the plea deal says. Like, the judge is going to overrule that.
Yeah. And I don't think we've gotten into the culture behind this either. Like, had this been different, if this was someone who was natively American or Filipino, and I don't want to point fingers because it was a different time back in the day, but I think that there's something to be said about culture. Again, I think so much of this episode really has a cultural significance around Asian American, Asian Pacific Islander, that type of heritage into this as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I don't really think that can be discounted in any way. You know, obviously there's, implicit bias exists no matter what, you know. So I think that's a really good point. So thanks so much for bringing that up. So a few predominant theories prevail about Teresita's death. The first being that this story was all true, that Remy Chua did indeed have these paranormal experiences that pointed investigators toward Teresita's murderer. Again, this is a belief in Filipino culture that this does actually happen, and there are a few details like her jewelry and Alan's visit that night that probably only Teresita would know about.
If he's not the killer, then who is? It's kind of what, if there's all these different stories that are going to come out. So tell me more, because I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, so I am like a huge believer in ghosts. I'm like way too much of an anxious person not to be intimidated by them. Like, I respect you, you respect me, and let's just like go about our separate ways. You won't bother me, I won't bother you, and we're good. But I just don't really know about this one. I like the theories that pop up next about this case, though. Those theories are that Remy faked the entire thing. This theory suggests that Remy had intimate knowledge of Alan murdering Teresita somehow. I mean, they all worked together, but Remy was too afraid of Alan to say something outright. So she made up these dreams and visions as ways to tip off police without sharing what she knew about him firsthand. It's also possible that Remy had something against him because there were some reports that Alan made complaints about Remy's work performance constantly. So Remy may have developed a bit of a grudge against him.
That really changes my thinking on the whole case. What do you think about that theory?
I think it's possible. There's a last theory that I like the best, but when we're talking about this theory, I mean, I do think it's possible. I think, I don't think that she had these premonitions. I just think it's too convenient of a story. And I think it's possible that if she really did have this grudge against him, or even if she just kind of knew something about it, but like was kind of just too afraid to like really speak up about it, this would be a really good way to kind of be like, this came to me as opposed to I knew this.
Yeah, that's true.
And, risk being a next victim.
It's a really sneaky way, for sure. I think that you're right. But then, I mean, she's got to live with that for the rest of her life, that she didn't say something sooner, whether it be to Teresita or to Alan or to the police, whoever, before the incident could have even happened, after the incident happened.
I don't know. I mean, I guess... Well, so let's go to the last one.
Okay.
Because I have a lot to say about this one.
Okay.
So the last theory is one that I feel that I like the most, in my personal opinion. The theory suggests that Remy may have been a co-conspirator in Teresita's death, that she had something to do with it, or at least had knowledge of it to the point where it was potentially incriminating. So Remy decided that she was going to put it all on Alan so he could take the fall for it. I really like this theory, only because it would make sense why Remy would know so much about Teresita's death if we were going to go along with the theory that the whole premonition thing is actually bogus. Maybe Remy confessed to her husband, and instead of going straight to police officers, they decided that they would make up this story of Teresita visiting them from beyond to divert some attention away from Remy and not to incriminate her and to paint it all on Alan. But if that is true, it makes me wonder how much police actually looked into the Chuas. I mean, ghostly evidence and paranormal activity aren't exactly admissible in court, so I guess I'm just wondering whether police ever looked at the Chuas as potential suspects. I would imagine they came up at some point, but again, it just seems odd that she wasn't subpoenaed to testify at Alan's trial. Like, she was the reason police even looked in Alan's direction to begin with. And
what is Remy's motive for wanting her gone? It almost sounds like a three-way triangle.
Yeah.
If Alan's complaining about Remy's work, I still think it's highly unfortunate that this happened to Teresita. That's
Absolutely.
obvious. But it would make a lot of sense if the paranormal, we just remove that factor entirely and she was potentially a co-conspirator and she's just living her life. Gosh.
Yeah, well, I guess I guess when I think about this theory, I think it's, I kind of picture maybe, the both of them going over there together somehow, and like he attacked her and, and she knew about it and, didn't say anything for so long. And so then 5 months later, like the guilt is just too much to bear.
Yes.
And so then that's when it comes up of like, okay, I have to say something, but I can't say, hey, I knew this for so long because I could potentially be charged with, obstruction of justice,
yes.
Or something, whatever that charge may be. I guess I could see how the guilt 5 months later is eating you alive. And so you just need to say something, but can't say everything, So this feels like a good way to kind of like, confess, but not confess.
Yeah. And then it's, I'm wondering if Jose was in on it at all then too.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I, because it's like, so if the premonition's bogus, then obviously he knows something more beyond what he's, letting on in terms of just being like, oh yeah, I had no idea who this girl even was. So I guess I could see, again, kind of like what I said, her just saying, I have to get something off my chest, this happened. And again, just to protect her, okay, let's just make up this story about these premonitions. And then we'll go to police and that'll be it. That'll be the end of it.
Very sly.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, and maybe none of that's true. Maybe they really truly had nothing to do with it. I mean, I have to believe that the criminal justice system kind of played out.
Sure.
And that Alan really was the right guy and, the suspect and he was convicted and, you know, that was it. But I don't know. I'm not 100% there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like there could definitely be more to this story that we don't know. And it's sad that we probably never will know.
Yeah, we definitely may never know for sure. But we do know that Alan eventually only served 4 years of his sentence. He was paroled in 1983, which again seems like not a very long time for those severe charges. In my personal opinion, to plead guilty to murder and only get 4 years, that's absurd.
That's very scary. And again, I feel like maybe the criminal justice system has transformed since late 1970s, early 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, I just know people who, not know people personally, but like I've heard of people who like serve longer for marijuana charges, you know?
Sure.
So, but that's a different conversation, probably. And so that is all that we have for you this week on Crime Over Wine. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on. It was so lovely seeing your face on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored to be a part of your podcast, Liam.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so happy you got to do this. So tell everyone where they can find you and your work online.
Sure. So Fletcher Marketing and PR, that's who I work with now. And you can find me on my Facebook page at Ashley Bogle. And you can just contact us if you want us to help you with your public relations, media relations, social media, all that communication stuff.
And let's also remember too that Ashley has a lot of connections to local news because that was her deal back in the day. So if you have a cold case or something that needs just a little bit of an extra push, that is in Tennessee, and she also used to work in South Georgia, has ties to North Carolina. Send it her way. She has lots of connections, and now you know somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always looking to make those connections.
Excellent. Well, and also I promised last week, I promised my friend Heather that we would do a review of the wine at the end and talk about how much wine we have left in our bottle. And I have like basically a full glass and like a little bit like less than a quarter at the bottom. And I also know that Anthony's helping you in the back.
Yes.
So I am not counting anything against you.
No, we just have a little bit left as well. I think Anthony's really enjoyed this too. He gives a thumbs up. He says it's really great. I've enjoyed it. So I didn't finish my glass, but that's because I think I poured a heavy one to begin with.
Listen, I was sipping on this episode. I had a lot to conversate about. And I always say that the more wine I drink, the more I am going to be able to solve this case.
I like that.
For sure. So, Ashley, thank you again so much for coming on. And thank you all for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories for yourself too. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we will see you next week for another episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.